Good afternoon. This is Danny Elms, and today is Sunday, August the 18th. We're one day into the NAR rules taking effect, and many of you have asked about the 11 forms that have been modified since June 24th. And to give you a date, those forms go live August 23rd, which is this coming Friday. So, how can I see those forms and go through them? Well, go to this website here, texasrealestate.com, and I've already got it open for you. And obviously, we are members, so click the red side. Then, once on this screen, scroll to the bottom, and there are forms. Click on the forms. Then I will go down further, and I'm looking for form changes towards the bottom. Review proposed and recently adopted changes. So click on that. Scroll down again. And we've got new forms, forms under revisions, and adopted form changes. So if you clicked on this, you'll see no new forms have been added since the last round. So we're going here, view the adopted form changes at the bottom. And look at that. August 15th was when they were posted. And there are the 11. Okay. If you scroll down further, there was some ones that were done June 7th, the ones May 15th, if you want to take a look at those. But these are the ones we're going to take a look at today. So we'll go one by one, and I'll show you what changes were made. So hopefully this will make some sense. First one we'll start with, go back to the top, the 1101. The first three are basically the same documents, just for different properties. The first one is to sell a property. The second one's to lease a property. The third one's farm and ranch. So they're very similar. So this one is the 1101, and the changes were made on pages 2, pages 3, pages 7, and pages 8. So we'll go to page 2, and it's easy to find what has changed by looking for the blue ink, which means added, or the red ink, which means strucken through. And you see the line there. Okay, so obviously what they did on the exclusive right to sell is they updated the compensation, which we knew they would. So if we read through it here, broker's fee with compensation for the other broker. This paragraph 5A includes payment of compensation to the other broker working with a buyer. Stricken through no longer matters. So it tells us to complete both 1 and 2. So it says, when earned and payable, seller will pay broker, that's the listing broker, insert total amount for broker and other broker. So they're just clarifying that this figure here or the flat fee here is what is going to be paid to both brokers. And this paragraph B is for a non-tangible asset, such as a trip to Spain, for example. New additions. If broker does not pay the other broker that procures a buyer as specified in paragraph 5A2 here below, broker's fee in paragraph 5A1 will be reduced by any amount not paid to the other broker. So as an example, let's say you put 6 here, and that's to be shared with the other broker, which we would have put here, let's say 3%, but you were the intermediary. So unless you change by amending the listing agreement, you will only get what is not payable to the other broker. So it'd be 6 minus 3, so you'd only get 3. So if you're expecting to get 4, if you're an intermediary, you need to amend this agreement. Simple as that. So back to here, what does paragraph 2 state? Red is stricken out. New verbiage is, if the other broker procures a buyer that purchases the property, seller authorizes a broker to pay, and broker will pay the other broker the following fees from specified amount 5A. So in our example, you put 6% here, you're putting 3% here as an example. Or let's say you're going to get $10,000 and you'll pay $5,000 to the other agent. And if you're using subagents, which I don't prefer to do, you put that information here. So new verbiage here, they've added, let's say paragraph 3, paragraph 4. Paragraph 3 says seller authorizes broker to publicly disclose compensation for the other broker as specified in 5A2. This statement here was actually paragraph 11F in the previous form. They've just brought it up here to paragraph 3. And paragraph 4 says broker will retain amount specified in 5A as broker's fees if there is no other broker that procures the buyer, including but not limited to transactions where the broker represents both seller and buyer, the intermediary or buyer is unrepresented. Amount specified in 5A2A will be applied towards any fees a buyer has agreed to pay broker as specified in a written representation agreement. Okay, so again, I might have misspoke up here earlier when I said 6 and 3, you'd only earn 3. Okay, if you're intermediary, this is the intermediary paragraph here. So this is saying here, if, for example, the buyer is paying the other agent, then you are not eligible for the entire 6% unless you amend this listing agreement. So sorry for any confusion there, but we're going through these changes together. Then here, paragraph B, they just added, again, blue line. So this paragraph B is when your seller tells you you will not be paying the other broker compensation. They just put the verb or verbiage, a flat fee of, to make it less confusing. Okay, so those were the changes on page 2. Page 3 had additional changes here. The authorization to disclose. So it says authorization to disclose seller paying buyer's expenses, struck out red, and it says seller and this is what was in paragraph 11F basically. Seller does or does not allow broker to disclose to other brokers and prospective buyers that seller will consider contributing an amount toward buyer's expenses such as the fees and other expenses payable by a buyer under a sales contract. Seller is not obligated to pay any specific amount and has sole discretion to determine the amount seller will pay buyer's expenses during negotiations with the buyer. Then it tells us to use TXR 1412 to authorize broker to disclose and advertise additional info, which was not modified from the June 24th. So that one is intact. So this paragraph is basically paragraph 11F moved up to what is now, that would be paragraph 5. A addendum, addition, whatever term you like here. Okay, moving down. So I said we're going to look at pages 2, 3, and moving down to page 7. What did we do on page 7 for this document? Page 7, one small deletion. And basically it says paragraph D, and we're now paragraph 11D. In accordance with applicable MLS rules as outlined in paragraph 6, broker may do all the following, which we're normally doing, but see what they've done is we can't use the word compensation or commission, apparently. So you'll see most of these changes, not most, many of these changes will be striking, or what's the word? Will restrict, struck the term when it says offers of compensation to buyer reps and. So just see that'll be something that's removed on a lot of these forms. Then we go to the last change, which was paragraph 8, page 8. I mentioned paragraph 11F was removed. You see all the red verbiage, and this is now moved to page 3. So we have just gone through the listing agreement, which is number 1101, and see there's the date it takes effect 8/23. Okay, so those are the changes to the listing agreement. So not too terrible. So now let's do this. I'm going to hopefully just go right back here. I will close this window and I will go now to the 1102, exclusive right to lease. And this has changes very similar to the 1101, but only 2 pages are changed, pages 2 and page 7. So going to page 2, if you've guessed we're going to be talking about the compensation, you're absolutely right. So look at this. Remember, red means they are taking it out. Blue means it's being added. So the broker's compensation. Broker's fee. This paragraph 5A includes payment of compensation to the other broker working with the tenant. Complete both 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 2. So when earned and payable, landlord will pay broker, insert total amount for broker and other broker, and you put the figures here. Okay, simple as that. And it does add, if broker does not pay the other broker that procures a tenant as specified in paragraph 5A2 here, broker's fee in 5A1 will be reduced by any amount not paid to the other broker. So again, to emphasize, let's say the buying agent has a buyer's rep agreement, and that buyer's rep agreement says their buyer will pay them, let's say, 40% of a month's lease. Well, your 5A1 said you would pay 40% of a month's rent. Well, the buying agent says, that's what I'm getting from my buyer already. You don't have to pay me. So you will reduce whatever you put here. Let's say you put 80%. You're only going to get paid 40% because the buying agent is not able to take more than what their buyer's rep agreement states. You've probably learned that from all the other videos and Zoom calls we've had. So paragraph 2, red means taken out. If the other broker procures a tenant that leases the property, landlord authorizes the broker to pay, and broker will pay the other broker the following fees from amounts in 5A. So let's say you put 80% here, and you're going to put 40% there. Or a flat fee. Let's say your flat fee was going to be $1,000. You're going to pay them $500, or whatever the case may be. Okay. And then they've added paragraph 3. Landlord authorizes the broker to publicly disclose compensation for the other broker as specified in 5A2, so you can tell the buying agents who call you, yes, I'm offering 40%. And then finally, paragraph 4, broker will retain amount specified in 5A1 as broker's fees if there is no other broker that procures the tenant, including but not limited to transaction where brokers represent both landlord and tenant, or tenant is unrepresented. Amount specified in 5A2 will be applied towards any fees a tenant has agreed to pay broker as specified in a separate written representation agreement. So if you can't get the intermediary, you'll be able to collect both sides of whatever you put in paragraph 1. Okay, those were the big changes, but we've also got changes on page 7. So let's go to page 7. And there it is. One small change. They have taken out the word compensation once again. So you may remember, oh yeah, we saw this on the 1101. It's the same thing. They're taking it out. And so those are the two changes or two pages that were changed in 1102, which is exclusive right to lease. So what is the third document we'll review? How about the Farm and Ranch, number 1201? Okay, so 1201, there were 3 areas of changes in the Farm and Ranch. Pages 3, pages 4, and pages 9. So let's go down to page 3. And the reason we go all the way to page 3 is that's where their compensation is listed. And what you'll probably see is, oh yeah, I saw this before. We saw this on 1101. It's the same thing. So all they've done is, if you've watched this video to this point, you have heard me talk about how to fill these out. So won't go through them again. Just record back a few minutes and re-listen, or just walk through them yourself. Okay, but it's pretty simple. Then that's pages 3. Pages 4, we just saw this in the 1101. This is what was in paragraph 11F that they've moved here. Okay, and you will see paragraph 11F, which was on page 9, the Farm to Ranch. If we scroll down, there's 11F, and you can see they're taking it out. Okay, so hopefully you've decided to understand that the Farm to Ranch contract, which is number 1201, goes into effect August 23rd. The only changes were the same changes that were in the listing agreement number 1101. Okay. All right. Let's go now to the 4th form that was modified, the intermediary relationship notice, right here. Let's wait for it to redraw. Okay. We've probably all at least seen, if not used, this form in our life. It looks like they have updated it to 2024, that little blue there. And then here in blue, added verbiage. It says this notice does not satisfy their written consent requirement under Texas law. What they're saying there is your listing agreement or your buyer's rep agreement must allow you to either show or act as an intermediary. If it doesn't, you need to amend that. And this is a document you're going to use to notify the seller and the buyer that you will act as intermediary on behalf of the broker, or the broker will be signing two agents to act as intermediaries. Okay? So to read this, to act as an intermediary, a broker must first obtain written consent from each party in a transaction. Written consent from the seller or landlord or the buyer or tenant can be obtained using applicable Texas Realtors listing and rep agreements. This form is intended to notify the parties that broker will act as an intermediary and whether the broker will appoint associates to communicate with the parties. So all we're doing here in this piece here is seller or landlord, pretty simple, and the buyer or the tenant has been replaced, or prospect has been replaced by buyer or tenant. Then they added this little word or, broker will or will not appoint, okay? Simple verbiage there. Then finally, this is a paragraph that has been added to a lot of the modified documents over the past few months. Broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors, MLS, or any other listing service. Broker compensation is fully negotiable. Brokers independently determine their fees. And that, my friends, is 1409. Those are the changes. So nothing major there, just some clarification. The next document we'll go through is representation disclosure, the 1417. And again, this is a one-pager. To me, the IABS is what we use to represent and disclose to a client that we are realtors and what we are supposed to do. So I think this is kind of overkill, but I will go through it. So what are the changes? All right, look at this. Broker represents the following party. The seller or landlord is now seller. Landlord gets its own line. Buyer, tenant gets its own line. And here's that paragraph I just read to you not 30 seconds ago from the previous document, the one that has been adopted for us to use. Okay. So there's a representation agreement, probably the easiest one to go through today. So I'll close this one and move to the long form, the 1501. Okay. Remember, we've got the long form, which is 1501, and the short form, which is 1507. Okay. So the long form, there are changes on pages 2 and pages 3. So let's scroll down to pages 2. All right. Remember, this is where we, as the buying agent, have notified our buyer of our fees. Okay. Broker's fees, when earned and payable, client will pay broker, complete all that apply. Purchases, which is percent of the sales price, let's say 3%, or a flat fee of, let's say, $5,000. See, it says or. Okay, it's not and. It's this one or that one. Okay, for purchases or leases, and you see there it is again, or a flat fee of. Okay, so they just clarified that. We had been getting a lot of questions about what that second blank meant, and this hopefully clarifies it. Now, we go down a little bit further, still on page 2, some additional things. They've renumbered a paragraph here. So service providers becomes paragraph 2, and they've added another paragraph, paragraph 3, that says other compensation. Only insert amounts or rates of compensation that are objectively ascertainable and the specific amount or rate is known at the time of execution. Do not insert bonuses or range of compensation or terms such as TBD. Okay? So let's say, for example, you know factually, because you've already, you're not supposed to show a home until you have a buyer's rep agreement agreed. But let's say, for example, you had maybe sold a home in the same community of a builder not a day earlier to client X, and then client Y happens to meet you on the same day while you're walking out of the first closing, and you know there's a bonus. Well, maybe put it in here. buyer to pay 2% bonus. Or, you don't know the sales price at that point, but you get the idea. That's what it's trying to intimate here. Okay. Now, notice regarding bonuses are right below it. Notice regarding bonuses, another compensation has been taken out. In addition to broker's fees specified under paragraph 7A, okay, right there, 7A, seller, landlord, or their agent may offer to pay broker a bonus. If client purchases or leases certain properties, broker will disclose the specific amount of the bonus offered to the broker. Broker may not receive any bonus unless authorized by client in writing. Client authorization may be made by amending this agreement, and it says use TXR 1505. Okay, so this is really about the bonuses and other compensation. So I said we also have changes on page 3, and it's right here. Easy change. They have just realized they had a small typo, so the typo was there. It's now changed to paragraph 9A. Okay. So not too many changes in in the long form, which is 1501. All right, our next form we'll talk about, we're moving very quickly through these, which is great. Notice from buyer's agent to seller. Notice from buyer's agent to seller. Okay. That's going, why would we have this one? And I gave it some thought over today. I thought, oh, well, maybe this is a situation where it's a FSBO, right? The FSBO, it's the seller is not being represented by anyone, and we want to ensure that they understand what we, the buyer's agents, are responsible for and not responsible for. So what I had here is to the seller from the broker, that'd be us, certain property line here for the address and the date. Look at it says this, your real estate broker has asked to deliver the enclosed offer to you. My client, okay, I am obliged to inform my client of any material information you provide to me. And then it says, this is the important part, I will not provide you with, and there is all listed. Okay. It says, I encourage you to contact your broker or your attorney for assistance. So it's saying, I don't do this for you, Mr. Seller. I represent the buyer. And then there's that one paragraph again, the same one that are on many of the other documents. And again, this form is called Notice from Buyer's Agent to Seller, number 1504. Okay, the next one, Amendment to the Buyer-Tenant Rep Agreement. I figured this one would be modified. And this is number 1505. It's a one-pager. We'll probably be using this a lot as we figure out how to decide what our compensation will be. And all they've got is they've removed one line here, probably to try to keep it on one page. And then paragraph D, they have added verbiage. So again, this is where we have gone into either, because it's a buyer tenant rep agreement. So we have got our basically 1501 or 1507 signed. And we've got the following. 1501 is long form, 1507 short form. Broker's fees in paragraph 7A are changed to purchases, percentage of the sales price, or a flat fee, to clarify that. If client purchases the following property and they put the address here. So that's been added. Same with leases, percentage, rent, or percent of all rents, or a flat fee. And then you put the property address. Then here's the bonuses down here for the short form or the long form, or long form, short form. Bonuses, in addition to broker's fee listed in paragraph 7A of the prior listing or buyer's rep agreement, broker will be paid a bonus from seller, landlord, or their agent in an amount equal to blank. If client purchases or leases the following property, put the address. Okay, so all they've really done is helped us understand how to better phrase these things and to ensure that we don't do and or, it's this or this, percentage or flat fee. Okay. Pretty simple. And there is the one about the bonuses still intact, just some verbiage changes. Okay, that is the number 1505 Amendment to Buyer Tenant Rep Agreement. Now let's go to information and notice to buyers and sellers. This is a 5-pager, and you just signed the last page. You may remember this document. Compensation, and there's that verbiage again. The same lines, broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Associated Realtors, MLS, or any listing service. Broker compensation is fully negotiable. Brokers independently determine their fees, and they struck this for some reason. So that actually, believe it or not, for this 5-page document, that was the only, oh, sorry, there it is. I missed that one. Water level fluctuations. Or maybe that's just a link. That's not a change. My apologies. So that is the only change on that document. Okay. So now let's close this window and get to the 2402 compensation agreement between brokers. And remember, this is the one that potentially a buyer's agent will send over to the selling agent or the listing agent that says, we've agreed that the seller will pay the buying agent X percent. Okay, so what have they changed here? Basically, they've changed the following. You know it's going to have to do with compensation. Cooperating brokers' fees. So they changed this to add or a flat fee. Okay, and they've added a third line, which is interesting because maybe, for example, it's hard for me to come up with a specific example that could be shared, but let's say, for example, the seller was offering, outdoor patio set. And maybe you're going to say 1/2 of the outdoor patio set. I think that's laughable, but you never know where something might come up. So that is basically the only change in this document. It's really this piece here, or a flat fee. Okay. And finally, of the 11 documents that are going to be added to zip forms on the 23rd, addendum regarding brokers' fees. Okay. A lot of blue on this one, so let's go through it. This is number 2406. It's really one page, but the signatures are on page 2 as well. Okay. So addendum regarding brokers' fees. Listing brokers' fees, added the S. Seller shall pay listing broker the fees specified in a separate written agreement. Okay. Other brokers' fees. Other broker fees will be paid as specified below, and buyer shall pay any remaining amount due to other broker specified in a separate written agreement. Okay. Remember, this is addendum regarding brokers' fees. And who signs it? Buyers and sellers. So this is their understanding of who's going to be responsible for what. So, continuing, check all that apply. Listing broker shall pay a dollar figure or a percent of sales price as contained in a separate written compensation agreement between the listing broker and other broker, and this was a compensation agreement between brokers, 2402. Specified amount is for informational purposes only and does not change compensation specified in separate written compensation agreements. Okay? Because remember, who is signing this one? The seller and the buyer, not the agents. Paragraph 2, seller shall pay, check one box only. So remember here, the listing broker shall pay. So that means the seller is paying the listing broker through the exclusive right to sell, for example, X amount, let's say 6%, and that 6% we're paying the cooperating broker 3%. Okay, but in this case, the seller is paying directly. So the seller will pay, paragraph A, a dollar figure or percent of sales price contained in a separate written compensation agreement between seller and other broker, the number 2401. This again says it's for informational purposes only. Or paragraph B, sales price towards other brokers' fees. Okay, so let's read it again. Seller shall pay either A or B. B is a dollar figure or percentage of sales price towards other brokers' fees. Use this option only if there is no separate written compensation agreement between sellers and other broker. Okay, so let's say they didn't sign for whatever reason the compensation between seller and broker. Use this here. Then the intermediary is spelled out all in blue. It's been added. Intermediary broker's fees. In addition to any fees seller has agreed to pay listing broker in a separate written agreement.